This man right here was the victim of one of the darkest and scariest black magic uses ever. It all started in 1991 where this man right here, whose name was Christopher Case, met a woman in San Francisco. Now, from Christopher's point of view, this was a normal meeting, okay? Him and the woman were just friends, but from the other side, the woman's point of view, well, it was different. See, the woman he was meeting was completely in love with him, okay? She even tried to raise him multiple times, going like, this Loki could be us. The only problem is, this man, Christopher, is not interested at all. Each time she tries to flirt with him, he go like, you. Oh yeah, they were clearly not seeing things in the same perspective. She tried to give him multiple hints, and Christopher would go like, yeah, no, I'm good. This thing happened multiple times until the woman realized that he is not in love with her and he'll never be. And when she learned that, she got mad, really mad, and this is where everything will change. Because after a while, the woman spoke again, and this time she admitted that she was a witch and that she placed a curse on him. Yes, out of nowhere, she said that, and she even precised that the curse that she placed on him is so strong to the point where he will not even survive until the end of the month. After that, she admitted that she was a witch and that she had placed a curse on him. Christopher's reaction was like, do 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 do. Obviously, he did not believe her. She was talking seriously about a serious topic, but he was just there trolling. After a while, Christopher's friends began to notice that Christopher is not going outside like he used to, and now he's always staying inside his house. Literally became a prisoner in his own home, surrounded him and his bed by salts, kept burning candles, and always had the lights turned off. Even told his friends that he keeps seeing entities and they are trying to attack him. He also precised that these entities he keeps seeing always try to attack him at night when he's sleeping. Okay, now some of you might be like, okay bro, he's just imagining stuff, he's being paranoid. Well no, the problem is, Christopher really had injuries everywhere, and according to him, these are the entities attacking him. He stayed like this for a long time, living in the dark, alone, lighting candles, putting salt everywhere. He was convinced that all of this was because of the woman who placed the curse on him. After a while, and precisely on April 18, police finally came to check his house after what they heard, and sadly, they found him unalived. They found him inside his bathtub, kneeling like he was doing a ritual. Bathtub didn't have water, it was just his body, and it was full of injuries. After the autopsy, it turned out that Christopher had no signs of poisonous, no signs of alcohol, and no signs of trauma, meaning that the man was completely fine and he was not under anything. Oh, this is why some people believe that the woman he met was really a witch and she really did use black magic on him. Other people don't agree with that. They say that he believed what she said, so it got him scared and he terrified himself until he passed.
Imagine trusting someone completely, marrying them, and building a life with them, only to discover that the person you loved never really existed at all. John List was a quiet, conservative, and deeply religious man. A husband, a father of 3, and the kind of neighbor no one would ever suspect of anything sinister. He attended church, he volunteered, and honestly, he blended in perfectly. But behind closed doors, his life was unraveling. He had lost his job months earlier, and instead of telling anyone, he pretended to go to work every single day. His finances were collapsing, debt was piling up, and rather than face the truth, John made a decision that would shock the entire country. In 1971, he murdered his entire family, his wife, his mother, and their 3 children in their own home. Then he did something even more disturbing. He disappeared, literally into thin air. John List created a new identity, moved across the country, remarried, and lived a completely normal life for nearly 18 years. His new friends, co-workers, and even his second wife had no idea who he really was, or what he had done. Back then, records weren't easily connected. Background checks and identity information weren't accessible the way they are now. No one was putting the pieces together. No one knew the man they trusted had a past filled with deception and unimaginable violence. It wasn't until his case was featured on national television that someone finally recognized him. It's terrifying to think that someone could start an entirely new life while hiding something so dark. You can never truly know who someone is just by how they present themselves. That's why things like public data check exist, to help you see the bigger picture and protect yourself. Always look up new people. Always do background checks. You never truly know what someone could be hiding. Stay safe, guys.
Police thought they were interviewing a serial killer, but when they looked up, they saw an 8-year-old. This case messes with my head because nothing about it fits what we think we know about children. When you hear serial killer, you picture an adult, a pattern that takes years to develop, trauma, some big turning point. But Ammar didn't have any of that. He was born in 1989 in Bihar, India. His family struggled financially. His dad worked day-to-day farm labor. Some days they had money, some days they didn't. But Ammar was their only child and they loved him so much. His childhood looked normal. He was your typical normal child, loud, stubborn, threw tantrums when he didn't get the things he wanted, but nothing was alarming. His childhood friends didn't notice that he was a little bit more aggressive than them. He threw punches when he played around, but they didn't think much of it, and they were all children playing together, so they didn't really know how to tell him to stop. By the time he was 8 years old, his aunt from his mother's side was struggling financially, and they were living in a village. She was able to find temporary work in the city. She really needed the money, so she went over to Ammar's house and asked her sister to watch over her baby only for a month until she's back from the city. The baby was 6 months old, and even though Ammar's mom hesitated at first, but she was heavily pregnant, so she ended up agreeing. One day, Ammar's mom left to go buy groceries. She put the baby in the crib and asked Ammar to look after him until she's back. She said that she'd only be gone for a while. When she came back, she noticed that something was off immediately. The house was too quiet and Ammar was sitting alone in the corner playing with his toys. She asked him, "Where is the baby?" Ammar said quietly, "I killed him." At first, she thought that he was stroking, but then he took her to their backyard and pointed to disturbed soil. According to Ammar's later confession, as soon as his mom left, he went to the crib, pinched and hit the baby until he cried. Then he strangled him, took the body outside, smashed the baby's head with a brick, and buried him in the backyard. When his mom heard this, she dropped on her knees and dug with her hands until she recovered the baby's body. Her reaction to this is a little questionable. Instead of calling the police, she waited for Ammar's father to come back home. And when he did, they decided to handle it within the family. And this was by beating Ammar, slapping him and telling him that this is wrong. Their reasoning was that he was only 8 years old. He doesn't really understand the concept of death. And calling the police will ruin his life and it won't bring the baby back. And a month later, when Ammar's aunt returned, they told her what happened and they begged her not to go to the police. They said that it was only an accident and that reporting it would ruin Ammar's future and their family's relationship. The aunt later said, while his parents were begging for her not to go to the police, she swore that she saw Ammar behind the door smiling. And for reasons no one really understands, she agreed not to go to the police. 8 months later, Ammar's mom gave birth to his baby sister. And despite what happened before, Ammar's parents believed that he learned his lesson, and they completely forgot about this and went back to treating him normally, labeling this whole thing as an accident. Then one afternoon, while his parents were resting, Ammar went over to the crib, strangled his baby sister, left her in there, and went back to playing. When his parents discovered this, they lost their minds, and his father's response again was beating him. And there was so much noise at this point that the neighbors heard it and they rushed in. He told the father that he needs to call the police, but his dad said that he would get rid of him himself. When Ammar's dad hit him, he started crying hysterically, and the neighbors say that he said, "What if I killed her? Like, it's not the end of the world." After a few days, the neighbors expected the police to be called over, but instead, Ammar's parents went knocking door to door, begging the neighbors not to report this to the police as it would ruin his life. And he's only a child, he's only 8 years old. He doesn't know right from wrong, and sadly, none of them did. And this allowed Ammar to take another life. His third victim is Khushbu, a 6-month-old baby from the neighborhood. Her mom had left her in sort of a daycare, but it's not really a daycare. It's one of these houses where old aunties and ladies look after kids while their moms are away. So she left her in one of these daycares and went to run errands. When she returned, the baby was gone. She was missing. No one can find her anywhere, and the whole village panicked. And the ladies at the daycare said that no one could have done this. No adult came by the whole day. And this is when one of Amar's extended family members, who actually knew about the cousin and the baby sister, approached Khushbu's mom quietly and said, "I have a nephew who has a history of hurting babies. I think that he's involved." And that changed everything. The whole village sort of ganged up together and went over to his house to confront him. His parents at first denied all of this, but when pressured, Amar stepped out of the house and led them to where Khushbu was buried. And this is when police was called immediately. Amar didn't resist his arrest or seem disturbed. In his confession, he told the police how he killed the babies, he used strangulation and bricks, and that he's only confessing because his parents taught him that lying is bad and that he shouldn't lie. And when they asked him why he did this, he answered, "Because I wanted to." And officers noted that he showed no visible remorse whatsoever and smiled frequently during questioning. Under Indian law, Amar could not be sentenced to death or to prison as he's underage. The maximum sentencing is 3 years, so he was placed in juvenile detention for a maximum of 2 years and then later transferred to a correction facility for minors until he turned 18. And the moment he did, he walked free. And that's the part that people struggle with. There is no confirmed public record of where he is now, but there are rumors that he changed his name, got married, has kids, and he's living next to his mom, but nothing is verified. And the question this case leaves behind, is a killer born or is a killer made? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are.
I feel sick to my stomach watching this kid plead for his life.
Please. Just save me.
저를 살해주시죠.
Please save my life.
저희 생명을 살해주시죠.
Please think of my family.
저희 가족에 대해서 생각해 주십시오.
Give me the oldest son in my family.
In 2016, Otto Warmbier went on a student trip to North Korea with 10 other Americans. The company that led this trip's slogan was "Destinations your mother would rather you not go to." While there, a bunch of the kids went to the 5th floor, which was for employees only, and Otto was caught on camera removing a propaganda poster from the wall, and the following day he was arrested. That video was him doing a false confession that he was forced to do and also pleading for his life. 14 months later, he was returned to America in a vegetative state and died a week after returning home. There is only one documentary on this, and it's on YouTube. It's only 45 minutes long. I would love to get a full-length documentary on this because I don't think that people actually really understand what North Korea is like. This is why my favorite documentary is Beyond Utopia. North Korea tortures its own citizens. Of course they tortured him. The documentary on YouTube heavily interviews the medical team that was flown in from America to get Otto. It actually makes me sick to my stomach thinking about it. Some other crazy North Korean documentaries are Under the Sun and The Mole Undercover in North Korea. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments.
This woman chases down a hit-and-run driver trying to do the right thing and ends up unaliving him instead. So one afternoon in 2019, Hannah Payne is driving home from work, just minding her business, when out of nowhere, she sees this red pickup truck speeding down the road ahead of her, going way too fast. And then in just a split second, everything changes. The red pickup speeds through a red light, but in that same moment, a big semi-truck is also going through the intersection from the other direction, and bam, they crash into each other. And Hannah, in complete shock of what she just witnessed, immediately pulls to the side of the road, grabs her phone, and dials 911. And she tells the dispatcher, "Hey, I just witnessed an accident. Can we please send someone over here ASAP?" And the dispatcher's like, "Okay, ma'am, we appreciate you calling us in. We'll get somebody out there right away." Beautiful, done. She did her part. That should be it, right? Well, no, because for some reason, Hannah, who had dreams of becoming a police officer, she felt like this was her opportunity to step up and put those dreams to use. So she gets out of the car while the dispatcher is still on the phone, and she starts walking towards the red pickup truck that crashed in the middle of the road. But as she's approaching the truck, she suddenly sees the driver's side door swing open and a man climbing out who is clearly not walking normally. It's 62-year-old Kenneth Herring, and he's stumbling and swaying on his feet, looking around with this dazed, confused expression on his face, like he has absolutely no idea where he is, what just happened or how he got there. And Hannah's looking at this man's strange behavior, and to her, it really looks like Kenneth was driving while intoxicated. And that must be why he was driving so recklessly and caused this crash in the first place. So Hannah's thinking to herself that she has to go stop this man and make sure that he is still here when police arrive, because she can't have this drunk driver just running away from the scene of an accident that he caused. But as she's walking towards him with that intention, Kenneth maybe sees her approaching and realizes what's happening, and he quickly stumbles back inside his truck, slams the door shut, and he drives off like he's trying to escape. And she's like, oh my god, he's trying to leave the crime scene. We need to get his license plate before he disappears completely. So Hannah runs back to her car as fast as she can, and she's yelling at the 911 dispatcher, who is still on the phone, by the way, I'm gonna chase after him. I'm gonna get his license plate so you can track him down. And the dispatcher's like, okay ma'am, but only get his plate number. Do not interfere or try to stop him yourself. Do you understand me? We just want you to be safe. But Hannah isn't really listening to that warning, because she has already convinced herself that this man is intoxicated and dangerous. And she says back, ma'am, he is drunk. I'm sorry, but I am not gonna let him go, because he'll just cause another accident if someone doesn't stop him. And the dispatcher tries again with even more force in her voice this time, saying very clearly, Hannah, do not interfere with this situation. We have police officers on the way who are trained to handle this. But Hannah is already full speed chasing him down the road with her foot pressed on that gas pedal, her hands gripping the steering wheel, and her eyes locked onto that red pickup ahead of her. And at some point during this chase, she sees Kenneth about to take this right turn at an intersection up ahead, so she steps on her gas even harder to close the distance between them. Her car launches forward with a burst of speed, and she makes a sharp right turn in front of Kenneth's vehicle, cutting him off completely and blocking any escape route that he might have had. Hannah then jumps out of her car while holding onto a weapon. She runs up to the truck's window and starts screaming, get out of the car, get out of the car now. I have police on the phone, get out. And Kenneth is yelling back like, who are you? You do not tell me what to do. And the dispatcher on the end of the line is hearing all of this chaos, and she's like, ma'am, no, stop, get back in your car. What are you doing? But Hannah just keeps on screaming at Kenneth to get out, and this man is just sitting there trying to get her to leave him alone. But then out of nowhere, she grabs onto her weapon and she points it directly at him, and she's screaming over and over, I will you if you don't get out of the car right now. And Kenneth, seeing the weapon pointed at him, panics and immediately tries to grab it away from her. He's pulling it away, and Hannah's tugging back at it and twisting it, and bam! All of a sudden, the gun goes off. And in the mix of all the struggle, Kenneth accidentally pulled the trigger on himself. And Hannah's standing there completely shocked, and she just grabs the phone and she tells the dispatcher, ma'am, he just pulled the trigger on my gun and himself. And the dispatcher, who's very upset, is like, Hannah, you were not supposed to follow him. Kenneth Herring, at just 62, died from that gunshot wound on the side of the road while waiting for paramedics to arrive. And it would turn out that Hannah was completely wrong about the entire situation. He wasn't drunk like she had assumed. He was actually having a diabetic episode, which explained his confusion and erratic behavior. So that means she did all of this to an innocent man who was having a medical emergency and desperately needed help, not confrontation. In the end, Hannah Payne was arrested, and in 2023, she was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. And it all happened because she refused to listen when the 911 dispatcher told her multiple times not to interfere, to let the trained professionals handle it, to just get the license plate and let it go. Sometimes doing the right thing means knowing when to take a step back and trust that help is on the way. And sometimes playing the hero can end in tragedy. That's all for today. I love y'all. Group hug.
My name is Connie. In 1967, I met Ted Bundy. I survived. I was 14 years old, and my mom said, we're going to the lake. So after a little bit, I just started walking around the lake. I hear rustling. Then there was a man coming out of the woods, and he said, hi, I'm Ted. He goes, why don't you go swimming? And I said, I don't want to go swimming. And he's like, oh, I'm the lifeguard, I've got to do my, earn my money today. So I'm swimming, and he grabs me by my hair and he plunged me under the water, and I could see him laughing, and his face went ropey, and his eyes were like two big black marbles. They were the ugliest things I ever seen. And I thought, I am looking at a demon here. This is not even human.
This is Andrea Yates. She was the youngest of 5 children. She did very well in high school. She was the valedictorian, a member of the Honor Society, but she also suffered from mental health problems all of her life. Andrea worked as a nurse for 8 years before she married her husband, Rusty Yates. A big part of their relationship and this story was that they were devout believers in a fundamentalist preacher named Michael Warren Yecke, who's pictured here. And his opinions were extreme, to say the least. Views like the bad mothers create bad children, and these ideas heavily influenced Andrea. They were so devout that they hosted a Bible study in their own home 3 nights a week, and they often shared with their friends that they wanted to have as many children as nature would allow. So that's what they did. Andrea and Rusty had 5 children together: Noah, John, Paul, and Luke, and their last child, Mary. However, after each birth brought on more severe bouts of postpartum depression. After her first child, she had her first hallucination that she was causing harm to somebody with a knife. In 1999, she was hospitalized and was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And just a few months later, she tried to take her own life, was hospitalized, and this time diagnosed with major depressive disorder with psychotic features. So Andrea is in really bad shape. She's not taking her medication. She's self-harming, like she's pulling out her hair and picking at her scabs. And she thinks the characters in the TV are judging her for being a bad mother. And she's 4 children she has to take care of. Doctors warned her that another pregnancy puts her at serious risk for giving her another depressive psychotic episode. But they felt it was their religious duty to have as many kids as possible, so they did go against medical advice, and they wound up having their daughter Mary, who's pictured down here. Unfortunately, the doctor's premonitions were correct, and it sent her into a very serious state of postpartum psychosis. And shortly after this, Andrea's father died, which pretty much rendered her catatonic, and was hospitalized again in 2001. Which brings us to the morning of June 20th, 2001, where something catastrophic happens.
On the 13th of March 1996, a gunman walked into a Scottish primary school. He opened fire, and within minutes 16 children from a Primary 1 class and their teacher would be dead. This remains the deadliest school shooting in the UK's history, and what happened changed the UK gun laws forever. Dunblane is a small town here in Scotland near Stirling. It's a close-knit community, and it's the kind of place where parents would feel safe with their children. It didn't have a high crime rate, and they would honestly feel safe letting their children walk about by themselves. That Wednesday morning just felt the exact same as any other. Parents were dropping their children off for a day of school at Dunblane Primary School. The Primary 1 class, which consisted of 5 to 6 year olds, were getting ready for a PE lesson with their teacher, Gwen Mayer. Around 9:30 that morning, a man drove to the primary school. He entered the building and he made his way to the school gym. He was carrying 4 legally owned handguns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Inside the gym at that time, there was 28 children and their teacher. He opened fire, and within minutes 16 children and the teacher would be dead. 15 others were injured, most of them seriously. Before the police could reach the shooter, he turned the gun on himself and took his own life. The gunman was 43-year-old Thomas Hamilton. He was a former shopkeeper who used to run a local boys' club. However, that had been stopped because there had been complaints about his behaviour towards the young boys, and those concerns were actually raised to the police. However, no criminal charges were actually brought against him, and despite these concerns, he legally still was able to own the firearms. The whole of the UK, especially Scotland, was just in shock. Mass shootings don't tend to happen here, especially not to children, and especially not in schools. People gathered outside the school with candles, flowers, and memorials towards the children and the teacher that lost their life that day. Churches across Scotland held services to remember them. The town of Dunblane just became a symbol for national grief. After this happened, an investigation began that was called the Cullen Inquiry. It looked at 2 key questions. Why did this happen, and how was this man legally allowed to own these guns? The inquiry found that even though the procedures had been followed under the existing law, the system still allowed people to privately own handguns even when those people were risks. In response to this, a group of parents and also citizens launched what was called the Snowdrop Campaign. That was named after a flower that blooms in the early spring. They gathered over 750,000 signatures calling for stricter gun laws in the UK. Following this, in 1997, the UK passed the Firearms Amendment Act. This essentially stopped the ownership of private handguns being used in the UK. It was one of the strictest reform of laws in modern British history towards firearms. Since the act was passed and since Dunblane, there has not been another school shooting of this scale in the UK whatsoever. One child who survived that day was actually the tennis player Andy Murray. He has publicly spoken about the impact that day had on him. For the families, though, that pain never disappears. The 16 children and their teacher are remembered every single year in Dunblane and across the country. Dunblane wasn't just a tragedy though, it was a moment that basically forced the UK to rethink gun ownership and laws entirely. It is such a sad and hard part of UK, especially Scottish history, however, it does show how much public pressure can actually put things into effect that need to happen. It made a lasting change, and most importantly, those 16 children and their teacher deserve to be remembered, and I'm so glad that it led to these changes so that something like this on this scale doesn't happen ever again. Let me know in the comments if you remember this happening. I actually wasn't born at the time, however, I just remember this always being spoke about growing up. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.
Open your eyes. Baby's over there sleeping.
That's
Your
another
other
one of your babies. Your baby down there.
your baby down here. I think I just have a little gas.
Say that again. Say it again.
I think I'm having some gas trouble.
Howard K. Stern, you are forever a monster in my eyes. Thank God for the one and only saving grace that came into her life after her husband's death during the reality show and during the trim spot era, Larry Burkhead, who Anna meets in 2003 in Kentucky while filming her show. Larry is a photographer and he gets hired as a part of Anna's entourage for this time. They meet during a time where Anna seems like she's off drugs, back in the spotlight, and according to people around her, back to kind of being her kind, funny, warm-hearted self. She invites him to come to Los Angeles to work and live with her and the rest of Anna's team. He accepts, and the two start a love affair, one that is way more serious than anyone in Anna's life to this day acknowledges as real. But once Larry moves to LA, he realizes this streak of Anna being really kind and level-headed is fleeting, part of a cycle that has been around for much longer than he has. According to Larry, Anna was abusing her prescription meds so heavily at this time, he'd witnessed her having 15 to 20 seizures in the short time that he was living there. He pushed those around her to get her out of the spotlight and into a hospital, but no one listens. Instead, everyone calls him annoying. They still call him annoying. And particularly during this time, while I know that she really loved and would have done anything for Daniel in her right mind, Anna was in no shape to care for the teenager. In the documentary Anna Nicole Smith, You Don't Know Me, one of her friends admits to giving a then 16-year-old Daniel snow at a party after seeing him reach for his mom's prescription pain meds. The snow was supposed to be the healthier alternative.
God, be careful. I can't, stop doing that. But here, have some cocaine.
Nice. Who knows how long Daniel had been abusing pain medication? And I just want to mention that because even though we can see and acknowledge the abuse that Anna was enduring, doesn't mean that we shouldn't see or acknowledge in turn that Daniel was being neglected and abused by her. I feel like that part of the story often gets kind of pushed to the side, but it's important for what happens next. So after being a part of this merry-go-round with Anna, Larry finally packs a bag to leave, and that's when Anna admits to him that she's pregnant and the baby is his. And let me tell you, if there's one responsible thing that Anna Nicole Smith did during her lifetime, it was choosing to have a baby with this man as opposed to the numerous, there were numerous, not judging, just a fact, others that she was sleeping with at the time. This I absolutely believe she did consciously. Larry, unlike anyone else, is pushing for Anna to get help, and this leads to a lot of fighting. And once Howard K. Stern finds out that Anna is pregnant, he takes Anna and flees to the Bahamas, because according to Bahamian law, it's the man who signs the birth certificate that becomes the legal father of the child, regardless of paternity, and he knows that. He's disgusting. This sparks another feud, not between Larry and Howard, but between Howard and a man named Patrick Simpson, who to this day claims that he was Anna's best friend. Both him and his partner are disgusting in the way that they talk about Anna and Larry's relationship to this day.
Larry was only in Anna's life for 1.5 minutes.
Right.
How many restaurants do you think they went to? What's a date? When you go get food for us? That's a date?
Allegedly, during the fighting between Anna and Larry, Anna approached Patrick to sign the birth certificate, a request made no doubt while Anna was high out of her mind and pissed at Larry. Howard hears that and he's like, no, that's not happening. Like, everyone is grabbing at a woman who's hardly conscious, trying to get I don't even know what from her, and mad at the other person next to them for trying to get ahead of the fraud before they have a chance to. And if you still don't think that Howard is a vile person, let me set up a timeline for you. On September 7th, 2006, Anna Nicole Smith gives birth to her daughter in the Bahamas. Howard K. Stern signs that birth certificate as the father. 3 days later, while still in the Bahamas, Daniel, Anna Nicole Smith's 20-year-old son, dies from a drug overdose. On September 28th, 18 days later, Howard K. Stern fucking marries a devastated and high out of her mind Anna Nicole Smith. And those two best friends of hers, they attended. And they all go back to the States where Howard K. Stern sets up an interview with her and E.T. to discuss the loss of her son. It is one of the most devastating interviews I've ever seen. Thankfully, by the end of the year, Larry Burkhead is fighting for a paternity test. Howard knows this is not his child. In the midst of this battle, Anna Nicole Smith would be found dead on February 8th, 2007. Thank God, Larry proves paternity, takes sole guardianship of baby Danny Lynn, and raises her out of the spotlight. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about her because they are private, but you can see the few TV specials that they've done together and see that she's a very normal, now young woman. Larry has done a phenomenal job at keeping her out of the circus that everyone else was fighting to raise her in. Garbage humans. Same circus that killed 2 people. In 2009, Howard K. Stern was charged with 6 felony counts and was found guilty for conspiracy to furnish controlled substances to a known addict, as well as using false names to obtain prescriptions. But by some miracle, in 2011, Los Angeles Supreme Court Judge Robert J. Perry dismissed these convictions. In 2015, after an attempt to reinstate the convictions, they were dropped again by the same judge who said, and I quote, "Stern has been through enough." I just want to reiterate from my last video, Howard K. Stern joined the LA Public Defender's Office in 2019. Yeah, he's still practicing law. I think he should be in jail. He supplied drugs to 2 addicts, one who was underage for a majority of that time, both who are now dead, and he gets to keep living a private life? Yeah, I don't think he's been through nearly enough, actually. That's all I got for you. What do you guys think?
The Green River Killer haunted Seattle for 20 years, and he is on his deathbed now, but he still says there are more victims that have not been discovered. 49 women that he was convicted of unaliving, and he claims it was anywhere between 71 to 85. It's time to talk true crime, and this is the case of the Green River Killer, aka Gary Ridgway. A little bit of background on Gary Ridgway. He was born in 1949, and his parents were a little bit odd. I've seen in a lot of reports his mom was apparently bathing him when he would wet the bed through his teens, including his private areas, and his dad was known to solicit women that worked the streets, and his mom talked down on street workers very heavily, and he also admitted to having an attraction toward his mother at a younger age. So not the typical childhood. Already not off to a great start, and those things may have led to his very unhealthy relationship with adult relations later in life and in his teenage years. But when he was a kid, he was already troubled. He was starting fires. He had a violent streak.
Living things kill animals.
Okay.
Animals. I stabbed a kid one time. It must have been about 6th grade, I think it was 7th grade. That was at some time I was breaking out windows.
He wanted to know what it felt like to unalive someone, but he didn't get caught because the little boy couldn't identify him. He didn't graduate high school until he was 20 and would marry his high school sweetheart right after and then join the Navy. He got deployed, and this is when he started interacting with street workers himself, and he caught diseases overseas which may have grew his anger against street workers. But he would come home and find out that his wife had cheated on him with a friend and was getting divorced. His first divorce was in 1972, but he would get remarried in 1973, and this is when he would have a son. And things were going well for a little bit, but then he would get divorced again in 1981, and this is when he claimed he became almost obsessed with street workers. And then in 1982, he would actually get arrested for soliciting a street worker. So he had a record involving street workers this entire time, but his family was not aware of this. His main route was the Pacific South Highway near the SeaTac Airport between Seattle and Tacoma, otherwise known as the Strip. And this is where he would pick up most of his victims. His family recalls having a family gathering on their property on July 4th of 1982, and Gary would get up and leave. And this is when they believe he picked up 16-year-old Wendy Caulfield, and this is believed to be his first victim. He picked her up from the strip and would unalive her and dump her by the Green River. And then on July 18th of 1982, two little boys would be playing by the water and see her body floating. Authorities were obviously concerned about this unaliving, but didn't necessarily consider it was going to turn into the kind of case it did, until another body was discovered, and that was 23-year-old Debbie Bonner, who was last seen leaving a motel on the strip. And a man who was working at a nearby slaughterhouse went down to the water to smoke a cigar and would find her body floating as well. Things only kept getting worse. On August 15th, a man was on his boat going down the Green River when he would literally bump into two more bodies in the water. Police come out to investigate, and they would find a third body right by this scene on the riverbank. The three bodies were identified as Opal Mills, Cynthia Hines, and Marcia Chapman. They were ranging from 16 to 31 years old, and this would just be the beginning of his 20-year spree. A task force was formed the next day on August 16th of 1982, and this was the largest task force apparently since the Ted Bundy case in the 70s. Authorities were at a loss. Obviously, DNA wasn't what it is now, and they had really no evidence to go off of. So they staked out by the river, and a news helicopter would fly over them and point out a police car hiding, and it blew their cover. Obviously, he was going to watch the TV after what he had just done to see if they had any leads, and this blew their only plan at this point. And it just kept on happening. On September 15th, Mary Meehan, an 18-year-old who was 8.5 months pregnant, disappeared. And then on September 20th, Deborah Estes, who was only 15 years old, would vanish as well. And then on September 26th, another young woman, I can't even say young woman, another girl, a 16-year-old named Linda Rule, would also go missing from the strip. And these women were believed to have all been working the streets, but a lot of their families came forward saying that they had troubled homes. They were working the streets to survive, just to get by, not because they wanted it to be there. And police were saying that they were literally finding clusters of bodies in the riverbanks. Almost all of his victims were manually strangled from behind until some started fighting back, and he started using ligatures to make it easier and avoid getting bruising and scratching on himself. From the summer to the end of 1982, his known victim count was 11, and that was just what was identified and who they were able to find. And later he would admit that after he unalived them, he would go back and visit their bodies and have relations with them post-mortem. He said when they started having maggots and flies on them, then he would stop. If that tells you how absolutely repulsive this being was. The winter of 1983 seemed to be quiet, and authorities thought that maybe it was over, maybe the spree had stopped, until April 30th of 1983, when Maria Malvar would go missing and her boyfriend saw her get taken. So he got in his car and started following them, but lost them at a red light. And then the next few days, her father and her boyfriend, who was also kind of her pimp, went looking for her, and he recognized the truck at a dead end, kind of on a cul-de-sac area, and this truck belonged to Gary Ridgway. So they called authorities out, and they go up to question him, and he says, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen her," and they didn't see any signs of her. So they didn't do anything about it. He had his arm with scratches because she had fought back up against a fence. They had him. They had an eyewitness say, "This is the truck that took my girlfriend Maria." And they didn't do anything about it because Maria wasn't apparent. She wasn't right there when they questioned him. His family does a documentary where they recount what their experience was, not knowing that their family member was the Green River Killer, because how could you have ever suspected someone you loved of doing something like that? And they recall talking about it in front of him, and he would just sit there quietly and listen.
I said to him, I just have no idea why that person, whoever this killer is, didn't bury those women. I can still remember him nodding his head.
Did he start burying the bodies after that?
Yeah, that's when he, at that point, started burying women.
I don't know if authorities showing up scared him, but he did change his pattern for a quick second. On May 3rd, so about 3 days later, he would take S.A. and unalive Carol Christensen. And Carol Christensen was not a street worker. She was a mother. She had a job at a tavern, and she had just finished lunch and then disappeared. And they would find her body in Maple Valley, Washington, in odd circumstances. She had a grocery bag over her head, a clean fish placed on her, sausage near her, a bottle of wine in her hand, shoe on the wrong foot. How did he treat people like this? How?
The one thing that I want you to know, I was that daughter at home, waiting for my mom to come home.
They just kept finding more and more victims, and by the end of 1984, the count was believed to be around 40 young women. That's more people than are in a classroom. Think about how many people, how many lives he affected. In early 1985, he apparently took his little boy on a trip up to Oregon, and he brought some remains in his trunk, hid them in his trunk, and dispersed them in Oregon with his son in the car. 1985 continues, and the unaliving seemed to stop. No new victims were being found, and it turns out that Ridgway had met a new woman and ended up getting married again. And he seemed to have stopped for a while. He had her move in, she had her own daughters, she changed things in his apartment like the carpet, and they were happy. She said he was great, kind. She never suspected a thing until she found out later on, and things started adding up. He was late home from work as a painter for a truck company, and he said he was at the junkyard.
He'd go to work early, and Judith would have his lunch all ready, and then after work he'd come over and sit down and have a beer or something to eat or whatever, and the dog would sniff him for hours and hours and hours. Turned out there was a lot to smell, a lot to investigate.
After his brief pause, he apparently quote-unquote fell off the wagon, and by the end of 1987, his count was believed to be around 46. But authorities finally had a lead, and it was green carpet fibers.
Invited her to go with him to the carpet store, and he asked her opinion on color and style of carpet, and of course she was delighted to do it.
They get a warrant to search Gary Ridgway's home in April of 1987, and they go in expecting to find that green carpet. And neighbors actually have pictures and remember that green carpet being in his apartment. But like I said, his new wife had moved in and changed things, and it wasn't there anymore, and they couldn't even find fibers in the vacuum cleaner. He had a record at this point for soliciting street workers, and they actually brought him in for questioning this time, unlike in Maria's instance, and they took a swab of saliva to get his DNA. They also asked him to take a polygraph test, and people working on Ted Bundy's case were also on this task force, and he passed the polygraph test just like Ted Bundy did, and they let him go. They cleared him because he passed a polygraph test, which is not unusual for narcissists. 1999, the task force was basically disbanded because they didn't really have any new leads, but his saliva DNA swab had been tested numerous times, and in 2001, 14 years after it was taken, it matched, and he would be arrested at 52 years old for only 4 counts of unaliving. He originally maintained his innocence, and his family believed that he was innocent because they had got him once before and then let him go, and they believed it was just a genuine mistake. They had the wrong guy, and they thought this time around was the same situation. While they only had enough evidence at this point to charge him with 4 victims, they believed the number was more towards 48, and they wanted victims' families to have answers and knew that Ridgway did not want the death penalty. So he got a deal and they waived it, and the courts thought that this was the best route because it would give those other families answers. In 2003, Ridgway would confess once this deal was made, and he confessed to all 48 victims that he was suspected of. He went to trial in Seattle and he pled guilty to all counts and was sentenced to 48 consecutive life sentences. Over the 19 years since the spree began, they would find bodies continuously, and they found bodies on the family property that his family would all gather on, build great memories, and they recalled him going on quote-unquote walks, and now they're questioning every great memory they had ever made. Was he going on walks to have relations with remains? Were they near them? How devastating and just heart-stopping is this for his family? He said that he would get the victims into his car and try to get them to come back to his house with them. And he would even show them pictures of his son to try to make them feel more comfortable. And if some didn't want to come back to his house, he would use a canopy over his truck bed or take them to isolated areas, convince them he needed to be behind them during intimate acts, and then unalive them. These women were just trying to survive. These women were just trying to survive. Another body would be discovered by accident in December of 2010, and this body would also be linked to Gary Ridgway, and he was given a 49th life sentence. 49. He is currently 76 years old and serving his 49 consecutive life sentences at the Washington State Penitentiary, and at the end of 2025, it said he was in declining health. He said he wanted to unalive as many women who he thought were street workers as he could, and he thought that he could get away with it because people wouldn't report them missing immediately. He said he hated them and wanted to get rid of as many as he could. What a sick. Mind you, it would take some time to identify some of these victims because they would use aliases when working on the streets to protect their identities. He still claims that he unalived about 80 women. So there is a huge possibility that there are still victims around this area just waiting to be found. He has shown little to no remorse despite all of his confessions.
I feel that so many women, I have a hard time keeping them straight. Is that true?
Yes.
He called one of the victims a stressor. A stressor. She was a mother. I am just so heartbroken and sorry and in disbelief for these women. They had whole lives ahead of them. They were mothers, sisters, daughters. They had families, people that loved them, people waiting for them to come home, and they were just trying to make it by, get out of a tough spot, get away from a troubled home life. They were just trying to make it like anybody else, and anyone can end up in a tough spot, and they were discarded like they were nothing because of it. It's just not fathomable. And it was hard to research and cover this case because of how little regard for human life this man had. The families of the victims have to serve life sentences themselves. Closure is not a thing in this case. They're mothers, sisters, daughters, family, and they never got to say goodbye. They're never going to get to see them come through the door again. I'm also sad for his family, his wife, his son, that this man could just betray them like that, and now they have to face repercussions because of his actions they had no idea were happening.